Hello and welcome to Whisky.com, where fine spirits meet. Today we're not at a distillery because we're looking at something that is not a single malt. We're looking at a blended malt. Yes, we're looking at the most famous blended malt, Johnnie Walker. For that, I'm here at the Johnnie Walker Archive. And the Johnnie Walker Archive is really, really incredible. They have almost all the bottles they ever bottled in their bottle archive, and they have 5,000 bottles just in that room. Then we have here a lot about the family history, about the traders the Walker family was. And then we do also have like the real archives with all their folders and all their, they kept a lot of archives, so there are tons of folders back there, and also a bit of their advertisement displays and films, old film reels. And so it's really a deep dive into what is Johnnie Walker. Yeah, let's start off a bit about the family history. The Johnnie Walker story begins with the Walker family. The Walker family actually owned a farm, and the farm was a small farm. Everybody worked on the farm, and in 1805 a boy named John Walker was born. He was the heir to the farm, but tragically when he was 14 years old, his father died. So the farm was without a master. That's really not good. So the family, he and his mother, decided to sell the farm. And they actually still have the contract back from the days. It was sold for 537 pounds and a few shillings and a few pennies as well. So with that money, the family decided to do something. So they went to Kilmarnock and actually bought a grocery store. So they opened a grocery store and sold different stuff. And in that store, they actually also sold spirits. And they were a bit more exotic with these spirits. So they had rum, they had whiskey, they had vodka. So they had a bit of oversea, they had gin. And people came to John Walker and said, hey, can you have something of that nature? I like that. And then he actually tended to blend stuff together and said, okay, let me mix something for you, and maybe that touches your taste. So back in the days, even when he just had a grocery store, he was already starting to blend stuff. So that was John Walker. And then when his son came, Alexander Walker, he got into the company. They changed the name from the company from John Walker to John Walker and Sons. And Alexander Walker kind of reformed the business a bit. He made it bigger. He traded much more with spirits, and he actually started his own brand of whiskey, the Old Highland Whiskey. The Old Highland Whiskey sold pretty good, and so he got much more into the business of becoming a producer with warehouses and blending, and not just being a grocer anymore. Alexander also had sons, and he had a son called Alexander II and George Walker. And so the Walker family lived on. At some point, John Walker got out of the company, but the company was still called John Walker and Sons. And what these two were doing is they expanded the business even further, and they actually bought a distillery because they were buying whiskey from all the distilleries, and they actually got into the distilling business as well. So they talked to Elizabeth Cummings, and in 1893 they actually bought the distillery of Cardew. So they were actually now in the producing whiskey business. They still had to buy casks from other distilleries to get the various flavors, to do the right flavor for their Old Highland Whiskey blend. And yeah, they got much more into the business, and they changed the business to what we know Johnnie Walker today. And let's go over there and have a look how that looks like. So let's find out what Alexander and George did during the time. They've seen that their brand was pretty famous and was widely accepted and was, people liked it. But people do like variety, and they couldn't deliver it with just one brand. So they had the choice of moving into new brands or into sub-branding. And that's what they did. So they come up with the Old Highland Whiskey, John Walker and Sons, white label, red label, and black label. Black label was always 12 years old. It was on the bottle. The other ones didn't have it on the bottle. Actually did have here in the advertisement. I'm not quite sure if it was legal back in the days, but nobody pretty much cared. So they changed into more different bottlings, more different products. And what they also noticed is that Scotland was not that famous or not that hip or cool or fashionable during the time. London kind of established itself as the capital of the world. It was the place to be. And London was full of fashion and new stuff. So they thought about, we need that within our brand. So they went to Tom Brown, a famous cartoonist at that time, and they talked to him, and he created what we do know as Johnnie Walker at the time right now. And he made that famous cartoon in 1908, and it's called The Striding Man. But they already written with pencil on it, Johnnie Walker, and also came up with the slogan, still going strong, Johnnie Walker. So they made John Walker into Johnnie Walker, a bit more nice, a bit more friendly, a bit more casual, and still went with the Walker and this fashionable man. Yes, fashionable, maybe not today, maybe very old-fashioned today, but very, very fashionable that time with the top hat, the monocle, very tight pants with the cane and gloves. That was considered fashionable at the time. So they were marketing themselves with a fictional character that was a very, very fashionable person at the time. And that was the person that really made the brand into what it is today. But if you look at it closely, that striding man is actually sliding left. And Johnnie Walker today is going right. He's walking right. And how that changed over the time and how the bottles changed, we're going to have a look at right now. So I'm here in the bottle room in the archive, and it's incredible. There are 5,000 different bottles here in the archive. So the variety is amazing. They're all from Diageo, and therefore we also have all the bottles from Johnnie Walker. And let's have a look at how the bottles and how the brand developed over the years on the bottles. It actually started off with the very, very old 1880 Old Highland whiskey, which was pretty generic, pretty round, and the archive says the snake did not, it was not in there when the bottle left Scotland. So this bottle is probably from the Asian market somewhere, and some Asian at some point of time thought, hey, it's cool to put a snake in there. So, and the archive decided to keep it. Back when the third generation then decided to have different labels, we see here the red label and the black label, still called Old Highland Whiskey. And it changed a bit over the years. They actually got a royal warrant from King George V. So there, after one point, they actually carried the royal warrant, which they do still carry today. Has to be renewed every 5 years, so at some point they might lose it, but it's still very good for as a flag carrier, so the royals still keep it on there. And at some point of time they actually put the Johnnie Walker on the label. So here we have Old Highland Whiskey, and then we have Johnnie Walker. And this was the big change when they became new, fashionable, and Londoners. And then we have a change during the 50s with a screw cap, and now there was a big change in 1999, where they all came together and said, okay, let's do a bit of a rebranding. So they changed the brand quite a lot. And there's a saying, or there's a rule in the film industry. When you go left, then you actually walk home. And when you go right, you walk away from home. You walk forward, walk into an adventure. If you look at classical films like, I don't know, The Hobbit or something like that, have a look at it. When they walk home, they come back to the left, and when they walk away, they walk right. So what Johnnie Walker wanted to do is they wanted to be progressive. They wanted to move forward. So they changed it from walking left to walking right. Now it's walking forward. And they actually changed the slogan from still going strong 1820 to the new keep walking Johnnie Walker. Also like, yeah, we keep on walking, we keep on going forward. So they're looking into the future rather than the other one still going strong. We came from the end of still strong. So this is how they progressed over time. And let's have a look at the black label. It was founded as the extra special Old Highland whiskey, black label with 12 years old, and pretty much kept going as the new black label. They dropped the extra special, also got the screw cap, and pretty much every black label has 12 years on it. There is a time where there was not 12 years on the label, and that was the time in the 50s. Yeah, that's because they got it from the war. The war, you didn't produce any whiskey, so you had a bit of a shortage in the 50s then. So, and now that we know that Johnnie Walker is now a bit more forward going, and let's have a look how innovative the brand is and how much special editions and that kind of stuff comes out here. So let's have a look what the innovation brought. I've already shown you that they innovated over the years quite a lot in this. They changed their brand and their logo. And one thing that was pretty innovative at the time was the swing. The swing bottle is a bottle that is actually swinging or rocking. So when you had it on your boat, then it was actually just going with the waves. And that was pretty cool for that time. And now here back behind me we have a lot of Johnnie Walker Blue Label. And the Blue Labels are all special editions for different continents like Americas, then there's a lot of Asians and South Americans and Europe and that kind of stuff. And what was really interesting is that George and Alexander actually already sold to 100 different countries, and they really got into these markets, and they didn't just go there and just sold it there, so they had to do marketing. Let's have a look how that marketing all over the world just worked. So this here is the actual archive. So here they archive everything that is not direct family history. Probably there's direct family history that's not that important also archived here. But they also archive a lot of advertisement and all that kind of stuff that is not just directly a bottle. So when you look around, you see a lot of folders, a lot of journals from back at the time. The Walker family kept a lot of journals, so they are very, very old journals here. And when you look at this cupboard here, you see that they don't just sort them here by year, as they were already so internationalized back in the days. So they sort them by year and country or region. And you have all stuff here like Hong Kong, Japan, South America, South Africa, and also the big various countries folder, because there are just too many small countries that you can't really have a big folder about it. And I'll show you one picture that is really iconic, because you see that they regionalized the marketing for all the different markets. Of course, they kept the brand reasonably the same, but at one point at the bottom and the second from the left, you see that this old Johnnie Walker is actually walking right. So some of them, they had a lot of liberties within the regions to sell the whiskey. And yeah, so you see a lot of cool old stuff here. Let's focus back on what is Johnnie Walker now? And I found a really great person to have that interview with and talk about what is Johnnie Walker now and what will become of Johnnie Walker, and that is Jim Beveridge. So let's have a little tasting and a bit of an interview. I'm sitting here with Jim Beveridge, and you've been in the whiskey business for 40 years with Johnnie Walker, and you're now the master blender of Diageo and the master blender of Johnnie Walker. Very respectable position, so you definitely do know everything about whiskey, huh? Thank you very much for having us.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Mm-hmm. So what are we having today?
Well, I thought we might look at some core Johnnie Walker blends.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll look at Johnnie Walker Red Label,
Mm-hmm.
Johnnie Walker Black Label, and let's finish with Johnnie Walker Blue Label.
Okay, so blends are always a bit more, I'd say, mysterious, because you don't know exactly what's in it. If you have, let's say, something like Cragganmore, it's a single malt, you know, everything's from Cragganmore. There's a recipe for Johnnie Walker, right? How well kept is the secret? Does everybody in the production line know what to put in it, or is it like a well kept secret? It's somewhere in a safe. How many people do know?
Well, there's very few people will know the recipe, and it is kept in a safe. So it's restricted to just a few people who understand how to combine all the different malt and grain whiskies that are in Johnnie Walker.
So, but you can always a bit think about what's in there, like from the distilleries that Diageo owns, but you do switch casks, so there's always a bit of a mystery going on, huh?
Well, it's quite clear. The Johnnie Walker blend goes back many years, almost, it's almost 200 years old now, Johnnie Walker. And so we have a very rich heritage, and we have, in our archives, we have records of the blends across that time. And the reality is that Johnnie Walker Red Label, Johnnie Walker Black Label, those recipes are very similar to what they were all those years ago. They really haven't changed very much. And they're still using some amazing malt whiskies from Scotland. Lots of whiskies are used in those blends, and they create the flavours that our consumers have come to know and respect.
Okay, I'm really excited. So we start off with the Red Label.
Sure. Let's
have a bit of that.
So let's have some Red Label, Johnnie Walker Red Label. And if you're a fan of malt whiskies, there are some amazing fresh malty flavours in Johnnie Walker Red Label. So let's just take a sip of this. It's got very fresh, vibrant flavours. And when I drink Johnnie Walker Red Label, it reminds me of all the different malt whiskies that I've come to know over the years. So we'll just take a wee nose. It's very fresh and vibrant, and it's almost like green apples. Very, very distinctive, bold flavours. And with a sort of and with a hint of smokiness there as well.
There's always a hint of smokiness with the Johnnie Walker.
Well, that's the classic Johnnie Walker style. It's a very traditional style of Scotch whisky, and it's very similar to how it might have been many years ago. And that's the style that our consumers have come to love and enjoy.
I love it. The Johnnie Walker is an enjoyable whiskey, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
It's a drinkable whiskey.
Absolutely. And I think that's what blends are all about. Blends are all about combining the flavours from lots of different malt whiskies, combining them together to create a complex combination of flavours. And then we use some lighter style whiskies to then reveal the flavours and make the taste sweet and accessible. That's the principles behind our blends.
I like it. I really like it. It's amazing when you have the distance from the nose, how it changes.
Yeah.
I like it.
Shall we take a sip while it's...
Oh, yeah.
And then we'll add some water.
Yeah, let's take a sip and then add some water.
See, that reminds me of all the malt whiskies that I know and love. That beautiful kind of fruitiness, sort of fresh fruit, vibrant fruitiness, and then the kind of there's definite smoky flavour in there as well, sort of lingering smokiness.
Well,
combined.
it just starts after a few seconds.
Yeah,
That's a very light smokiness.
it's quite light. It's there. You can still. It's got a long finish, and there's also a nice, delightful sweetness to the blend as well.
Yeah, the sweetness is fragrant and very much present,
Yeah,
combined with that fruitiness. I think that's what the people like about Johnnie Walker.
yeah,
And you always think about when you have a Scotch whiskey, it's like old and oaky and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you have that in your glass and you're like, oh, that's really
yeah.
refreshing, nice.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, let's add some water.
Let's add some water, because the water's good. The water is good because it, when the whiskies are made, the flavours are trapped in the spirit. But when we add the water to it, it releases the flavours, and that's why we add water. So just add some water to this, and it begins to release the flavours in the whiskey. Yeah, the fresh flavours just become more obvious. And to me, this is it's like summer fruit, apples and pears.
Apples.
Yeah,
I do definitely get the red apple.
yeah. It's sort of crisp and fresh and refreshing flavour in a sip. Lots of flavour, that crisp freshness, then sweetness as well, and then that sort of smokiness is there, that kind of lingering smokiness that is there.
Oh, it actually made it even a bit more smoky.
Yeah, I think so. It brings it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it releases the smoke somehow.
Yeah.
I love it. It's nice.
Johnnie Walker Red Label is it's very refreshing. I think it's nice to drink it neat with a little water like this. It's also good if you drink it long with tall glass, with lots of ice, maybe some more water or some soda or other mixers. It just makes a very refreshing Scotch whisky.
So, as a master blender, you make the blends. So, because of the old blends, I mean, you have the recipe and they're all done continuously to keep the quality alike. But when you do new, like special releases, I've seen some anniversary editions. Now we had the GOT. And how do you come up with new recipes? How does that process work? Do you just find something or mix something, or do the marketing team come to you, or how does it work?
Well, Johnnie Walker has a long tradition of innovation, and I think it mostly comes from the market. So our consumers will tell us the kind of flavours they like, the kind of whiskies they would like to enjoy. So that's our signal, and then using that, we then think about how we might innovate and create new expressions of Johnnie Walker. That's usually how it happens. So it comes from the market, and then we then apply our knowledge to achieve that objective.
Well, that's a good point, because if you come from the market, then you always produce what the customer likes.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. Very, very nice.
But in a way, as whiskey makers, as you know, Scotch whisky must be at least 3 years old before we can call it Scotch whisky. So in a way, as whiskey makers, we have to be thinking ahead, almost predicting what our consumers might like in the future.
Yeah, that's
so we have to think of that.
That's an interesting thing, because you as a master blender, you have to have the ingredients. So you have to talk to the master distillers or the distillery managers to, looks like we need to go a bit more in that direction.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Yeah, it's a very special job, I think.
I think so. We have to stand in the future as well as the past, because in the past we're using whiskies from the past, and in the present as we are just now. But also thinking about the future as well, because we need to make our whiskies with a view on what we think we need in times to
come. It
come.
really needs careful thinking, because it's such a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, we're going to taste Johnnie Walker Black Label now.
Let's have some black.
And Johnnie Walker Black Label is 12 years old. So it's hard to imagine.
What's the world going to be like in 12 years?
Yeah, I mean, today we're in Cragganmore,
Mhm.
and the whiskey's being made at Cragganmore. In 12 years' time, we'll be in Johnnie Walker Black Label. So it's hard to imagine just exactly what that might be like. It's
12 years
it's
time.
quite a thought, isn't it?
What did you do 12 years before? Like, okay.
Exactly. What year? Exactly.
2005.
So
I think I was still in school.
well, so I've been with Johnnie Walker for 40 years, and I'm now in my 4th generation of Johnnie Walker Black Label.
Mm-hmm.
So in the first 12 years, I was learning about how to make whiskey, and then the second 12 years I was then applying that as a blender, and then the third 12 year I was thinking more about the future, you know, where we should be, and now I'm into the 4th generation of Johnnie Walker Black Label. It's quite a thought.
Yeah, it's quite a
Quite a thought.
quite a thought.
So let's try this. Johnnie Walker Black Label. Again, this is a very old traditional recipe, which when you go to the archive, you'll see records of this blend. So let's have a nose of this. Now, the big flavours here. There's definitely the fresh fruit. There's also some, and it's more like, it's less about springtime, more about summer. Fruitiness, kind of rich fruitiness, and then some flavours. We call them like almost like dried fruit, like raisins and sultanas. There's flavours there.
Yeah, it's a bit more oxidized.
Yeah, the smoke is definitely still there, and then there's sort of quite distinctive sweet vanilla flavours.
It's I would call it a bit more intense. Also a bit more oxidized,
Yeah,
like
it's deeper and richer.
raisins and that kind of stuff.
That's right. Yeah, it's not as Johnnie Walker Red Label is fresh and vibrant. Johnnie Walker Black Label is maybe more it's more contemplative, and the flavours are there and more complex and richer and deeper in flavour. So let's take a wee taste. Wow. It's all the hallmarks of Johnnie Walker. Fruitiness, rich fruit, fresh fruits, gentle smokiness, and sweet vanilla.
Okay. Oh, okay, now here comes a bit of the smoke. I would describe this one as complex.
It is complex.
There is the other one had a bit one direction, a bit more into the fresh direction.
Yeah.
This one just spreads out.
Absolutely.
So hard to describe what's in the lead. Hard to describe. I would say bit the fruitiness, but the other
You don't
flavors
need to
are
worry about that because it just works. That's the main thing.
yeah. Usually when you go into a whiskey, then you give it a lot of time and a lot of thought, and some of the whiskeys are meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah.
I think you can take some time and just take a deep dive and really go into it, but you can also just have a sip.
Just enjoy it. Just enjoy the flavours, the very warming flavours, and then that complexity of flavour opens out. So the whiskies in Johnnie Walker Black Label, we talk about the four corners of Scotland. We talk about whiskies like Clynelish in the Highlands, Cardew. You're going to visit Cardew in Speyside. There's Glenkinchie in the Lowlands, and then Killila.
Yeah, I've been at Killila.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful place. Just the still house.
So Killila is a very, very important malt distillery for Johnnie Walker. When they make Killila for Johnnie Walker, they take enormous care to create that flavour that we now find in Johnnie Walker Black Label.
I love it. So Johnnie Walker is a well-known brand. Like I think pretty much everyone who's watching this video will know Johnnie Walker.
Yeah.
But I've done a bit of a history research. There were a lot of blends back in the 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and they've been discontinued in the 80s and the 90s. But Johnnie Walker kept on walking. So why did Johnnie Walker survive and the blend industry took a bit of a dive? What's so special about Johnnie Walker?
I think it's, well, we're very lucky. We have an amazing blend, an amazing recipe, which we've inherited from through those years. We have rich sources, rich stocks of whiskies, almost 10 million casks of whisky. Rich combination of malts with a lot of different malt whiskies, different flavour styles. And the lighter grain whiskies, which are great at revealing the flavours and adding sweetness. It's just a wonderful combination of a classic blend of Scotch whiskies. And I think it's that asset that has seen Johnnie Walker through. I mean, remember also there's the enormous craftsmanship that sits behind Johnnie Walker. Through you visiting the different distilleries, our casks, our craftsmen making the casks, our coppersmiths making the stills. And then the blending team who spend a lot of time working to make sure this blend remains as it always has been and keeps that quality there. So that's all part of the Johnnie Walker heritage, and I think that's what sits behind the success of Johnnie Walker. So
what you're saying is it's the sheer amount of work that is being put into the bottle to have such a quality.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Good answer.
Shall we add some water to it?
Oh yes.
Yeah. Okay. This will open it up a wee bit. Begin to some of the flavours will come out. Begin to be revealed a bit more. Yeah, it's just a bit more. It just releases the flavours. I find that with water, the apple and fresh fruit flavours, they tend to come out first of all, but the dried fruit like raisins, sultanas, and figs, they now are there as well, and there's some hidden spiciness and zesty orange flavours as well. They're all revealed.
It's amazing how I'm always amazed, even though I'm already also quite a couple of years in the whiskey business. I'm always amazed how you get something that is made of grain. Malt is grain, so how that can be so fruity.
Yes.
It's always amazing how you can have apples in there. It's just
it's the yeast that does that.
Yeah.
When you take the from the malt, you then ferment, and during that fermentation, amazing esters are produced by the yeast. And then when you mature the whiskey, particularly long maturation for, let's say, 12 years with Johnnie Walker, those fruity flavours are building up and being created as well. So there's some very amazing chemistry goes on there during those 12 years in our warehouses.
Very, very nice.
And I mean, Johnnie Walker Black Label wins lots of awards. I think Jim Murray's just recently voted it one of his best blends for 2020. So
it's
really
an
pleased.
amazing blend, and I think it's meant to be enjoyed, and
Absolutely.
I think many people do.
Yeah.
So are the recipes a lot different between the different expressions?
Well, the principles remain, but they're obviously different. For each of the blends. So the principles are the key big flavours in all Johnnie Walker blends will be a combination of fresh fruit, rich fruit, sweet vanilla, and smokiness. That's the sort of key flavours, and they're all in different combinations, different percentages.
I think the richness and the fruitiness and that kind of stuff that I can't quite pinpoint it. I wouldn't say that I could take it out in a blind tasting, but I think that little touch of smoke, that just every time you have a Johnnie Walker, like, oh yeah, that's that little touch of smoke. I don't know why, but it's for me that's like Oh, that's a Johnnie Walker thing.
Yeah, and well, I think that is Johnnie Walker, and I think it takes a lot of skill to get that flavour just right. I think Johnnie Walker achieves that. We've learned that from over the years, just exactly how to do that.
And it's, for me, it's strange because it's not something I would say, okay, let's classify that in ppm, but it's that light touch that just touches it.
Yeah, and that's why distilleries like Kalila are so important to Johnnie Walker. And distilleries like Cardew and Clynelish, Glenkinchie, all these different malts are hugely important to creating the flavours that you'll find in Johnnie Walker.
So, Blue Label.
Blue, yeah.
The Blue Label it's not quite top of the line, but it's like the really premium edition, right?
Yes, Johnnie Walker Blue Label is really special for Johnnie Walker. When the blend was first created, our aim was to use the best whiskies we had to create the best flavour. That's really what Johnnie Walker Blue Label is all about. It uses some, we use rare whiskies for Johnnie Walker Blue Label. Rare in terms of their age, in terms of their flavours. It's really an expression of all the amazing whiskies that we have for Johnnie Walker.
Yeah, I find it always amazing that it's not a cheap whiskey. You have a good price tag on it.
No, it's not.
But it's many people buy it. It's just people know that you get the good stuff.
What I recommend we do, though, my favourite way to drink Johnnie Walker Blue Label is to sip some water first of all.
Okay.
Let's sip some water, and just to clear our palates. So let's do that first of all, and then have a nose. That clears the palate, it's quite good. Kind of refreshes your senses.
I got good water here at Kringmo.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Water's important. So then we can nose the whiskey. And you begin to get a sense of the bold flavours that are in Johnnie Walker Blue Label. They're much more, there's huge complexity in there, great depth of flavour. And it's very, you just want to go in there and discover the different flavours that are there. And the flavours are quite refined versions of what, things like, if there's fruit in there, it's autumnal fruit, rich autumnal fruit. Sort of ripe apples, ripe, rich apples flavours in there. And if it's bananas, the banana flavours that are quite ripe bananas, all those deep autumnal, almost like fruit compotes, sweet compotes, very rich and sweet and fruity. The richer, the richer fruits are more intense, like they're quite concentrated flavours. And then the kind of the rich fruits, the raisin sultanas, they're deep, rich versions of those things.
I like it.
And then the smokiness is there for sure.
But I think I have to say, smokiness is a bit. I'm not quite sure if I got the right distance, but it is there. But it's just a whiff.
What we need to do now is take another sip of water.
Because of the water, yeah.
Take a sip of water and then immediately have a sip of Johnnie Walker Blue Label. So have a sip of water, kind of rinse your mouth out. Yeah, let's drink Johnnie Walker Blue Label. And the flavours just explode in your mouth. It's like a giant wave, and a big wave from the sea, bursting on the shore. This explosion of flavour.
Oh.
It's just amazing.
Oh. I like it, and it's such a delicate taste.
Absolutely, it's easy on the palate, and yet it's also very intense. And you get all the different flavours I've talked about, like a big Atlantic breaker. all these bold flavors.
Yeah, you do have a lot of the fruitiness, but what I also do get a bit of a maltiness in there.
Absolutely.
For some reason.
Yeah, maltiness is there because obviously some really special malt whiskies are used in Johnnie Walker Blue Label, and they just explode in flavours. And then there's this burst of flavour, including the smoke, and then there's you can imagine as the waves recedes back into the sea, you're left this kind of lingering finish, which is just classic Johnnie Walker.
Yeah, it's one of these whiskies that activate your mouth and just makes you want to have another sip.
Absolutely.
that's the beauty of a good whiskey, when the whiskey makes you think, like, I want to take another sip. Then you know you have a good whiskey in your glass.
Johnnie Walker Blue Label is very special. We're very pleased with Johnnie Walker Blue Label.
I really love it.
Great. It's a lot of. We spend a lot of time, choosing the whiskies, making sure they're just right, and we know that our consumers worldwide really enjoy the flavours that they'll find in there.
So I think my father did most of the tasting for Johnnie Walker, but I did have a few of them. I think I had the Blue Label, and I had one. I think it was a rye. Was it red rye?
Yes, red rye.
Red rye. So I think there was a Jane Walker. So there are quite many special releases, and it is changing. You said there is a bit of an innovation going on. Where do you think the Johnnie Walker brand is moving? What do we see in like 12 years?
I think the Johnnie Walker Red Label, Johnnie Walker Black Label, Johnnie Walker Blue Label, they will be the heart of Johnnie Walker. I'm absolutely certain of that. Enjoyed in all sorts of different occasions. With Johnnie Walker Red Label and Johnnie Walker Black Label, you see different serve occasions, and you see lots of work with bartenders creating amazing cocktails with those whiskies. So that I think will be the core to Johnnie Walker. Nevertheless, there will be innovation for sure, because it's really important that we keep moving and thinking of new ways of expressing Johnnie Walker. Johnnie Walker Red Rye is an example. Johnnie Walker White Walker. These are all examples of innovation, and I think those styles of flavours are very important for certain consumers, and we'll always want to be able to achieve that. So for sure there will be innovation.
But it comes to you as the customers demand.
Yes, absolutely. Our customers tell us the flavours that they like, and that is the history of Johnnie Walker. It's always one of being in tune with our consumers and making sure that the whiskies that we make are whiskies that we know our consumers will enjoy.
Yeah, it's always important to listen to the customer.
I think so. Yeah,
definitely. I love it. So it's a beautiful dram.
It's a lovely way to talk about whiskey.
Definitely. So yeah. Thank you very much for the
It's been my pleasure.
interview. Thank you very much for the whiskies, showing me how Johnnie Walker is meant to be enjoyed. And yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, then please give us a thumbs up. Or if you know anybody who might be interested in this video, then please feel free to share this video with your friends. And see you next time.